The eCom Q4 Summit was created to prove that any seller can experience a highly profitable fourth quarter with access to the right tips, strategies, and techniques. There's no need to struggle trying to figure out what to sell, where to find it, or how much to list it for. The summit covers everything from sourcing to listing to marketing and streamlining your operations. It doesn't matter if you're selling on one platform or multiple platforms like Amazon, eBay, Shopify, Walmart. And it doesn't matter if you're a new seller or an experienced seller. The information in the summit will help you get sale after sale after sale after sale during the busiest shopping season of the year, if you take massive action. So welcome to the eCom Q4 Summit.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Q4 eCom Seller Summit. My name is Meghla Bhardwaj, and my topic for today is how to find and vet suppliers in India. So let's get started. I'm going to first of all give you an overview of India sourcing. What are some of the pros and cons of sourcing from India? And then I'm going to go into how you can find suppliers in India, how to vet suppliers. And I also want to talk a little bit about my upcoming India sourcing workshop. So just a little bit of introduction about me. I have been working in the sourcing industry in Asia for almost 20 years. I started my career in India, and then I moved to the Philippines, China, and then I'm currently in Singapore for about 6 years. I lived in China for 10 years. I worked there in the sourcing industry. While I was in China and also in India, I used to produce manufacturing research reports. And we used to basically visit all of these factories and find out how products are manufactured and write about the exact process of the manufacturing of these products and what affects the quality of the products. And basically, these reports were for importers who wanted to source these products from China or India. So that gave me a really good, or I was able to see manufacturing up close, and I was able to understand the issues that buyers might face when they're sourcing products from Asia. More recently, I've been focused on Amazon sellers and e-commerce sellers. I've been helping them source products from India. I organize a sourcing trip to India, which is of course currently on hold. And most recently, I have launched India Sourcing Network, which I will talk a little bit about later in the presentation. And this is a platform to help Amazon and e-commerce sellers source products from India. All right, so let's get started. So let's first talk a little bit about why you should source from India. What are some of the pros and cons of sourcing from India? And of course, this is mostly about private label. So we're not talking about wholesale or anything like that. This is all private label where you contact a supplier, you give them your design, your product, and then they manufacture that product based on your specific requirements with your own brand. So one of the advantages of sourcing from India is that there are a lot of different unique products that are actually not found in other countries. There are a lot of, for example, handmade products that are produced by these artisans that have this very skilled, they're able to produce skilled handcrafted products because these skills have been transferred from generation to generation, and they've been doing this for hundreds of years. And so these are sort of this type of skills that you can't find in other countries because they're very unique to India. In addition, there are specifically for fabrics and textiles, there are a lot of different types of, there's a huge variety of fabrics that you can find in India. In fact, each state in India has a very distinct and different kind of fabric. So some states will have more embellishments or embroideries or handloom fabrics are also very popular. So those are some of the unique products that you won't be able to find in other countries. In terms of product categories, I find most of the products that are Amazonable are wooden products, metal products. These are home decor, home gift items, a lot of fashion accessories such as jewelry, semi-precious stones, etc. And then we also have organic cotton. In fact, apparel and textiles are one of India's leading exports. And you can find a lot of different variety in terms of apparel and textiles. Another advantage is low MOQs because a lot of these products that are relevant for Amazon sellers are actually handmade. So you can find that you can find suppliers that will actually accept low MOQs. Now, typically the MOQs will range anywhere from 200 to 300 pieces or so, but they can also go as low as 50 pieces if you wanted to. But of course, it's not advisable to ship such a low quantity because the shipping costs become quite expensive. So generally, if you are sourcing these handmade wooden, metal gift decor items, we recommend sourcing at least 200, 250 pieces. Most of the suppliers that you deal with in India will speak fluent English. The accent may vary depending on the region, but it becomes easier to communicate. In China, sometimes things get lost in translation. Of course, there are English speaking people and staff at every factory in China, but sometimes you might find that it's easier to communicate with suppliers in India. You can just pick up the phone and have a conversation with them, or you can get on a Zoom call and it's easy to understand them. Another advantage of sourcing from India is that currently there are no trade tariffs on India products. I mean, there are of course import duties, but on China-made products, there are these additional duties that the U.S. has specifically imposed. Those tariffs are not found on India-made products. Typically, the products that you will source from India, the home decor, gift kind of items, those would have duties ranging from 2 to 6% or so for the US specifically. A lot of the companies in India are export focused. And what this means is that they understand the standards, the design requirements, and the needs of overseas buyers. A lot of these companies have designers that they work with that are from overseas, from the US, from Italy, etc. And they exhibit at overseas trade shows. So they really understand what your requirements are. Now, there are a lot of companies in India that are domestic focused, and you want to totally avoid those companies. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But you find that a lot of companies that you deal with, it's easy for you to talk to them, and easy for them to understand your requirements because they are export focused. There's a huge emphasis on eco-friendly products nowadays in India specifically. And we're seeing a lot of suppliers being very creative in terms of the materials that they're using for these products. For example, there are some suppliers that are using plant-based materials to produce fashion products such as bags, wallets, belts, etc. And these are materials that are made from cork or cactus or pineapple fibers, very eco-friendly materials that are being positioned as alternatives to genuine leather. Also, India has low labor costs. So if your product requires manual labor, for example, if it is like a garment that you do need a human to sew the garment, whether they use machines or not, those kinds of products are more competitive to produce in India because labor costs are typically lower. In fact, labor costs in China have been increasing over the last few years. And this is the reason why a lot of garment and apparel manufacturers, particularly, have been moving their low-end production out of China into low-cost countries such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, Mexico, and India. So if you do have a product that does not require a lot of machinery, equipment, automated, production processes, but it's more labor intensive, then India would be a good place for you to source those products. Some of the cons of sourcing from India, there is a limited product range that you can source. For example, you typically would not source electronics products or electrical products or plastics and the low priced, high volume automated kind of products, like silicone baking mats, for example, or silicone bakeware, for example. Those kinds of products you would source from China. India specializes more in the products made from natural materials: wood, metal, ceramic, glass, cotton, jute, these kinds of wool, these kinds of materials. Some logistics service providers may not be familiar with FBA requirements because currently there are not too many Amazon sellers sourcing from India. Most of them are, as you know, sourcing from China. So sometimes you might find that factories and also logistics service providers may not be familiar with Amazon requirements. And you may need to educate them and tell them of the requirements, but be very careful when you deal with a logistics company, because sometimes they're not sure how to deal with situations where an Amazon seller is actually not based in the US. If you're outside of the US but importing products into the US, not all logistics service providers can handle that. So make sure that that if you do deal with a logistics company in India, that they have done Amazon FBA shipments in the past. We do have a recommended freight forwarder in our network, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. For some of the products, the lead times are longer because these products are made by hand. So the lead times can be longer. Of course, it also depends on what kind of relationship you have with your supplier, because suppliers tend to prioritize orders of buyers that they have a good relationship with, and buyers who are placing repeat orders with the suppliers, because relationships are really important when you're sourcing from India. But typically lead times range from, let's say, 2 months to about 2.5 months. So 8 to 12 weeks. That's the 8 to 10 weeks, sometimes even 12 weeks. That's the typical lead time that you will have. And so just keep that in mind when you are sourcing from India. Infrastructure is not as developed as it is in China, but I don't see that as an issue as such. The ports function pretty well and they're quite efficient. There may be not that many ports in India, for example. For example, in China, there are ports next to every major production hub along the East Coast. But in India, there are specific ports, or there's one main port, actually, Mumbai, where most of the exports go from. But there are other ports in South India and also in East India. But so you just have to keep that in mind, that wherever you source your product from, just keep in mind that the port might be far from the factory. So you have to make sure that you also include some transportation time from the factory to the port when you are calculating your overall lead time. So now let's talk about where you can find suppliers in India. Now, the first thing that you can do if you're looking for suppliers in India is just go to Google and start searching for suppliers. So you could use phrases such as India, then the product name, and exporter, or supplier of so-and-so products in India, or product name, India manufacturer. So there are different ways to do searches. Once you do a search, bear in mind that you will get a lot of supplier directories on the search results pages. So if you look at the screenshot over here, the first one is Exporters India. That's a supplier directory. India Mart, India Mart. There's so many different supplier directories. And then the fourth result over here is actually a supplier, Organic Kitchen Towel, organictextileindia.com. And then the result after that is also a supplier directory. So a lot of these supplier directories are very good with SEO, and their results are usually at the top of Google search results. So you might have to dig a little deeper and look at the URLs very carefully to see if they're actually manufacturers' websites or if they are some of these supplier directories. And I'm not saying supplier directories are bad, but if you want to go directly to a supplier's a website, and if you're looking for suppliers on Google, then I would suggest just look for suppliers and then look for their websites. Of course, if you are looking to source via a platform, if you're looking to find suppliers on a platform, just go directly to that platform. For example, go to Alibaba.com or Global Sources. I'll talk a little bit about that. But this is a really good way to start. And Google is not blocked in India. So in China, Google is blocked. So a lot of the supplier websites don't index on Google, but that's not the case in India. So most of the suppliers you will be able to find on Google. Now, just bear in mind that a lot of the suppliers, even though they have websites, they may not update their websites on a regular basis. In fact, they don't even post their products on their websites. Most of them, you have to usually contact them and ask them for their latest catalog. Okay, The second way to search for suppliers is via supplier directories. And there are two main supplier directories out there, Global Sources and Alibaba. And of course, you are familiar with both of these if you are already sourcing private label products from China, because these are the two main export directories out there. Even though the majority of companies on these two websites are from China, there are companies from India and, in fact, other countries as well. In fact, both Global Sources and Alibaba have offices in India, and they're very actively recruiting exporters from India to list on their websites. So, what you need to do is after you do a search for a specific product, you need to use the country location filter to filter suppliers by India or Vietnam or any other country. So, this is over here is a screenshot from Alibaba, and I've done a search for men's sleepwear. And then at the top of the search results page, you'll see the country filter. And once you choose India, you'll be able to see suppliers or products from Indian suppliers. And then this is a screenshot from Global Sources. So I did a search there. And then on Global Sources, it's actually on the left column and it's hidden under supplier location. So you'll have to expand this menu in the left column and then look for supplier locations. And that's how you find suppliers from India. Because usually the top of search results on these supplier directories, they are paid positions, and a lot of the Chinese suppliers pay for these positions, and that's why they appear right at top of the search results. One supplier directory that I would strongly recommend you to avoid is IndiaMart. And there are a couple of reasons for it. So IndiaMart is a great website. It's got thousands of suppliers from India. But the problem is that the majority of these suppliers focus on the domestic market. A lot of these companies are wholesalers, importers, distributors that are actually importing products from China or other countries and distributing in the local market. There may be manufacturers, and there are, in fact, a lot of good manufacturers on IndiaMart as well, but you have to dig very deeply and vet the suppliers very carefully to make sure that they are indeed manufacturers and that they are export focused. It is extremely important when you're sourcing from India to source from export focused companies, because India is a huge market. There's 1.2 billion people in India. There's huge demand for products domestically. And so a lot of the companies, a lot of the factories in India produce only for the domestic market. They don't export. And so if you do source from a company that has never exported before, that doesn't have any idea of the standards, requirements of export markets, you are bound to have issues with quality, with delivery times. Sometimes they may not even be able to export the product out of the country because they don't have an export code. And sometimes these companies might not tell you that they're not export experienced because they just want your business. So you as a buyer have to be cautious, and you have to make sure that you vet the supplier really well. And we'll talk a little bit about how to vet suppliers as well. But just avoid IndiaMart as much as possible. Start with Global Sources, start with Alibaba, try to find suppliers there. Even on Alibaba and Global Sources, you'll find that sometimes a lot of companies are actually traders, but they are export focused. Even if they are traders on those websites, they do have export experience because Alibaba Global Sources are export focused directories. But IndiaMart is very domestic focused. In fact, if you look at this, even the prices that are listed on IndiaMart are in rupees. So this sign over here is actually Indian rupees. So this is 363 rupees, 150. And I have spoken to IndiaMart personally, and they have told me that they are really focused on the domestic market. They do want export, orders or inquiries coming through the website, but that's not their focus. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about India Sourcing Network. This is the website that I have launched, so I'm going to spend a bit more time on this. This is basically positioned as a platform that provides Amazon e-commerce sellers everything you need to source products from India. Now, I have been helping Amazon e-commerce sellers source from India for a couple of years, and there were a few issues that I thought people were facing that other directories were not, helping satisfy. So, for example, there is not a lot of information about service providers in India. when you are sourcing from any country, you do need service providers. You need freight forwarders, inspection companies, quality control, sourcing agencies, photography maybe. You may need a lawyer because you want to do contracts with your suppliers. So what we've done is we've created one platform that has everything you might need to source products from India. And broadly, there are three pillars of India Sourcing Network: content, connections, and community. With content, we are referring to information about how to source from India, because there's a lot of information out there about how to source from China, but there's not much information about sourcing from India. And that was a huge gap that I saw when I started working in this industry. And so that's why we put together a lot of content. There's a free guide that you can download. There are blog posts. There are lots of webinars that we do on a regular basis. And we even have an India sourcing workshop that's coming up. So all of this is really focused at educating and informing people about India sourcing best practices. And then we provide a lot of connections to vetted suppliers and service providers. Now, the suppliers on the website are actually only by invitation. So it's not like a supplier can just pay to be on the website. What we've tried to do is be very, very selective about the suppliers that we feature on the website. And this is why we don't have, thousands of suppliers, and we probably won't ever have thousands of suppliers, because we don't want to be a supplier directory like Alibaba as such. We want to be a very small boutique kind of sourcing platform that has a curated list of the best suppliers that are out there. So if you do a search for a specific product, you may not find hundreds of suppliers. You may find 5, but all of those suppliers have been vetted. They have, they would provide quality products. Of course, you still need to make sure that you communicate with the supplier and ensure that they can manufacture the product that you specifically need. But there are 3 things that we check for each supplier that is interviewed and featured on the website. First of all, we check that they're a legitimate company, that they are paying their taxes on time, and to the extent that we can, that they are paying their GSTs and everything. Because unfortunately, there are companies out there in India or other countries as well that may be individuals. They're not companies as such. So we want to make sure that these are companies. Second, we want to make sure that they are manufacturers. So there are, of course, a lot of trading companies, and they're merchant exporters, and there's no harm in sourcing via merchant exporters if you want to. Sometimes it can be advantageous as well. But as a platform, we decided to focus only on manufacturers, because a lot of the Amazon sellers, they want to develop their own products. And when you do that, then it's easier to coordinate directly with a manufacturer. Then the third thing that we check is whether or not they have export experience. And this is also very important, because as I mentioned, when you're sourcing from India, you want to make sure that you're sourcing from an export experienced company. So that is a connections part of India Sourcing Network. And then we also have a community. So we have a Facebook group of over 7,500 members, and we help people who have questions about sourcing from India, or if they get stuck somewhere, or if they want some tips and advice on how to negotiate or how to manage freight. We've got a lot of experts in the group as well to help sellers. So content, connections, community, those are the 3 pillars of India Sourcing Network. And the website URL is indiasourcing.net. This is a very new website that we just launched in early July. So do check it out. Okay, so let's keep moving here. And these are some of the categories that you can find on India Sourcing Network. So fabrics and apparel, bags, home products, home furnishings. Now, these are more of the Amazonable categories that can be sourced from India. And here are some of the service providers that you can find. And so basically, these are all the service providers that you might need when you're sourcing from India. So sourcing agencies, if you don't want to deal directly with a factory, or if you're having trouble finding a factory that's suited to you, then you can use the help of sourcing agencies. Packaging suppliers, that is extremely important. Inspection and QC companies, logistics, photos and listings. If you do want to do your photos in India, we have a photographer that is very familiar with Amazon requirements. In fact, he's an American who lives in India, and he also sells his own brand of products on Amazon. So he knows exactly what Amazon's requirements are for for photos and graphics, and also he does listing optimization. Videography, we have a specific videographer in case you want to do product videos, or if you also want to send if you want to do videos about the factory or how the product is manufactured, because some of these products are manufactured by hand, and the process is very unique. So you might want to tell that story in your A plus content on Amazon, or you might want to highlight that in your brand story that, hey, this product is very unique and this is how it's being made, etc. Then of course the 3PL warehouse and payments too. Like a lot of companies, a lot of sellers ask me, how to pay suppliers when we are sourcing from India. So there are lots of different payment service providers that we've tested over the last couple of years. And finally, we found one payment service provider that really works quite well. They have a great transfer rates, and they also have very good exchange rates. So you can get access to that payment service provider here as well. Okay, the third way to find suppliers is at trade shows. Now, of course, currently there are no physical trade shows being held. Most of them are virtual, but there's a fair known as Delhi Fair, and it's also known as Export Promotion Council. It's organized by the Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts, and this is known as the Canton Fair of India. It's held twice a year, April and October, in Delhi, of course, and it features about 4,500 suppliers of various types of products, such as gift products, home products, apparel, jewelry, a lot of different categories. And all of the products are very Amazonable. And all of the suppliers are export focused. That's something that I really like about this fair. There are not many, or there are not any actually, domestic focused companies here, because this fair is organized by the Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts, and only exporters can be part of that council. So the exhibitors at this fair are very high quality suppliers, and they really understand the export markets. So, of course, the fair is not being held in person currently, but they are doing a virtual edition of the fair. So, if you just search for Virtual Delhi Fair, you'll be able to find the website. And what you want to do is you want to get the supplier directory. So, I think the supplier directory is still available online, even though the fair is not going on. But the next edition of the fair will be held in October. That will also be virtual. So when it is going on, register for the fair and then get the supplier directory. There are about, I don't know, thousands of suppliers in that directory. And during the fair, you can also download the catalogs of each supplier. So you can go to their virtual booths and then download the catalogs. So the same organization, Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts, organizes this Indian fashion jewelry and accessories show. And so all of these suppliers are also export focused. And this show has just ended 27th to 30th July 2021. But you can still go to the website and register for the fair, and you most probably will be able to get the supplier directory as well. So again, all of the suppliers here will be export focused and good quality suppliers. Some of them may not be manufacturers, they may be trading companies, but that's okay. At least they have export experience. And then there are also a lot of global trade shows that you can visit that are, of course, not being held in person currently, but some of these fairs are hosting their virtual editions that you can consider attending. And once we start hosting, once exhibitions restart, you can actually visit some of these fairs as well. So, for example, in Europe, there's Autumn Fair in Birmingham, Maison and Objet in Paris, and Milan, Frankfurt. A lot of the Indian manufacturers that are export focused will exhibit at these fairs. They usually, bring samples from India, and then they set up their stalls and everything. So you can actually meet Indian suppliers at these fairs. At some of the major fairs, there are also pavilions for India suppliers, separate pavilions where a bunch of suppliers from India will have their stalls. So similarly, sourcing at Magic Fair in Las Vegas, and then in Australia, there's Decor Plus Design Show and International Sourcing Expo. Again, a lot of these fairs are not being currently held online, or I mean, in person. They're mostly being held online. Some of them are on hold as well. But just keep this in mind that Indian exporters do exhibit in these fairs as well. Okay, another way to source or to find suppliers is via sourcing agents. Now, there are a lot of different types of sourcing agents in India, and they're also known as buying agencies. And there are, like single person team, like a single person company where there's just one person who's an expert in sourcing, or maybe they've worked in the sourcing industry for a certain number of years and now they've started their own sourcing company. And they're also very large companies that have offices in different cities and they specialize in different categories. So there's an entire spectrum of small to really large companies. So you need to decide what kind of sourcing agency you want to work with depending on your requirements. And typically for Amazon sellers, I would suggest avoid the single person, companies, because they're a bit iffy and you're not really sure, how reliable they are and how much they may have a lot of experience in sourcing, but you don't really know how much they can manage if they're just one person. Usually you should go with the mid-sized kind of companies that have, maybe 5 to 10 people in the team and they can cover different cities. Sometimes these agents specialize in certain product categories. So it's always good to ask them if they have sourced your specific product in the past, or if they specialize in the product that you are trying to source, because then they will have a good network of suppliers and they will know exactly which supplier can make the type of product that you are looking for. If they have not worked on a category previously, then they may have to go out and look for suppliers, and they may not be able to find the best supplier for that product because it's really the first time that they're working on that category. So definitely ask them which category do they generally specialize in. And in terms of categories, some suppliers specialize in soft goods such as furnishings or bed covers, bed sheets, apparel, garment. And then there are hard goods such as metal, wood, glass, ceramic. So generally that's how the how it's differentiated. The categories are differentiated as soft goods and hard goods. But of course, within soft goods and hard goods too, there are subcategories that are pretty important. For example, if you're sourcing something in wood, maybe the supplier does not have experience in wood. Maybe they only do metal. So definitely check their product specialization. You should also vet your sourcing agents just like you vet your suppliers. So check their information online, check their GST company registration. And I'll talk a little bit about GST and how to check GST info in a little bit. But you can also ask them for customer references and then talk to the customers that they have dealt with. In India Sourcing Network, we do have a couple of different sourcing agencies that we have vetted and that we recommend. Don't sign exclusive agreements with sourcing agencies. Sometimes they will ask for signing exclusive agreements, but I don't like to do that because I like to have the freedom to source via any agency. Why should I be tied to a particular agent? I think sometimes the agents are concerned that you might bypass them and go to a different agency, or you might go directly to the manufacturer. So that is okay to include in the agreement, that you will not go directly to the manufacturers that they have introduced to you, because that's not fair to them. They have done all the work to develop the samples for you with the manufacturer, and then if you just cut them out and go directly to the manufacturer, it's sort of not very fair to them, right? Respect their time. So a lot of times what happens is Amazon sellers, they want to get samples developed from a lot of different suppliers and sourcing agencies. And sometimes they're not even sure about what product they want, but they still get samples developed. So just be mindful of this. Make sure that you're doing your research upfront and you're absolutely sure about the product that you want, so that whether you're dealing directly with a supplier or a sourcing agency, you actually know what you want, and you can straight away tell them, okay, here are my specifications, this is what I want, this is the packaging, these are the dimensions, color, finish, whatever, and go find a supplier or go make this for me. So make sure that you know what you want very, very clearly. Work with a sourcing agent as a partner. And I can tell you, if you are new to sourcing from India or any country, in fact, a sourcing agency can be worth their weight in gold, because some of these sourcing agents have been working for decades in the industry and they know everything in and out. So don't think of a sourcing agent as, oh my God, I have to pay him a commission and it's extra cost for me. Think of them as an extension of your team. Think of them as your eyes and ears on the ground in India or China, wherever you're sourcing from, and work with them as a partner. So I'll give you a recent example. There was somebody in our community who was sourcing wooden products, and they went directly to the manufacturer, and this is the first time that they were sourcing wooden products, so they didn't really have an idea of how to make the product um, strong, or how to make the product secure. And the supplier was just making the product based on the buyer's requirements, and of course the supplier was also giving their own suggestions. But at the end of the day, a supplier will just make whatever you ask them to do. And so they were making these shelves, and the shelves were basically different panels that were joined together, and the panels were coming apart when they did the inspection, and when they did drop tests, and the panels were coming apart, they were not strong enough. And so this buyer and supplier were going back and forth and like, oh my God, what can we do, what can we do? And then finally they got this sourcing agent involved, and the sourcing agent was really specialized in wooden products, and she suggested a method of connecting the two pieces of the two panels of wood with V nails, or with something secure. And the supplier was not aware of this, and but the sourcing agent, because they had so much experience in wood products specifically, they were able to recommend this, and the product was really improved significantly. So sometimes, of course, you're expecting the supplier to know everything about the product, but sometimes suppliers are just making the product based on your requirements, and they're not taking the time to actually give you suggestions. But if you have a sourcing agent, they're working on your behalf with the supplier, and they have your interest in whatever they do. Okay, so that's about sourcing agents. And the way to find sourcing agents is you can just Google sourcing agents India. At India Sourcing Network, as I mentioned, we also have a few agents that we have vetted. Another way to find suppliers is via export promotion councils. Now, these are non-profit government organizations, and their task is only to increase exports in certain categories. And only exporters can be part of these councils. So each major industry has a specific council. This is a partial list of the councils. There are plenty others. But what you can do is, depending on the category that you're sourcing, you can do a search for that council, go to their website. Usually they will have a list of suppliers there, or you can send them an email and ask for their member directory or their supplier list. And they will usually, give the supplier list to you in some way or the other. This The list may be very long because usually they have thousands of members, but at least you have a good list to start with, and you can start contacting these companies, and at least that these are all export focused companies. They may or may not be manufacturers, but they are definitely export focused companies. So this is a good list to start with, but you may have to do a bit of work sifting through all of the suppliers on these lists. Here's a screenshot of one of the councils. So this is the Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts website, and all of their suppliers or their members are actually online on their website. So what you can do is go into their member directory. It's under buyer section, and search for the specific product that you're looking for and which city you're looking for. And this is optional. The most important thing is the products. And then you find the entire list of companies with their email addresses, telephone number, contact person, as well as all the products that they make. Now you'll see over here that there's a long list of products listed. So you don't really know what product this company specializes in, right? I mean, do they mostly do cotton bags or do they specialize in leather? Because leather production is a very, very specialized kind of production. And so if they're doing leather and they're doing cotton and they're doing, other things, um, you don't really know what their in-house capability is. You have to call them and find out what exactly they specialize in. So this looks like the supplier looks like they specialize more in leather products because they've got quite a few categories in leather, but they may just be a company that's sourcing the different uh, materials from various suppliers and then just making the bags in-house. So we can't really tell just by looking at the product categories if this is a bag supplier that produces materials in all sorts of bags. And so their capabilities, their in-house capabilities is actually bag production. And you can give them any material and they would produce a bag for you. Or is it leather? Do they only do leather? Because leather production is very specialized. Some of these leather companies, they also have their in-house tanneries to process leather. So this is a good list to start with, but you do need to do a bit of digging to find out what the company really specializes in. Okay, how to vet suppliers. Got to be an online detective. Okay, there are a couple of things that you need to check when you are, when you find suppliers, especially when you find suppliers on Google or even on Alibaba, because sometimes on Alibaba the companies are not manufacturers; they are trading companies. So if you do want to really source from a manufacturer, and then you can use this method that I'm just going to tell you to basically check if they are a manufacturer or not. So GST is goods and services tax. All companies in India need to pay this, and all of the GST registered companies, their information is publicly available online. Not all the information, but some basic information is available. And even the GST number of most companies is publicly available. So the first thing that you should do is type in Google GST plus the supplier name to get their GST number. And usually their GST number is mentioned on their own website or on a government website or maybe on IndiaMart. So once you've got their GST number, go into this URL and you can type this in, take a photo. We'll also be sharing the slides, but you can also search for check GST number India. And you'll come to this website, services.gst.gov.in, and enter the GST number. Now, once you enter the GST number, let's go to the next slide to see what exactly you'll see. So after entering the number, you'll see some basic information about the company, such as the legal name, the trade company, the date of registration, whether the GST number is active, what type of business it is, where it is located, the city, what type of taxpayer it is. And then let's go to the next slide to see what other information you'll get. Now, this is really important. If you really want to check if a company is a manufacturer, if they have in-house capabilities, then you want to see the word manufacturer in their core business activity and the nature of business activities. If they're not a manufacturer, they'd probably have like wholesale or retail or export or import over here. So you want to make sure that you're actually seeing manufacturer if you do want to source from a manufacturer. And sometimes companies will say that they have factories that they are manufacturers, but actually they don't. So this is a way to verify that. In sourcing, they say that you should trust but verify. So this is a way to verify whether or not they are a manufacturer. And then you can also see the different kinds of product categories that each supplier has registered themselves under. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list because this is during their initial registration and they can always, expand to other categories as well. The other thing that you can see is how whether or not they have filed their GST returns on a regular basis. In India, you're required to file the GST every month. And so you can see the date of filing and whether or not there are any gaps. So if there are any gaps, then you know that maybe there's something not right. So over here, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, but February, March is missing. So why is February, March missing? If they do have regular orders, and they should be filing GST on a regular basis. So if you do find gaps, these are sort of red flags that you have to be aware of. And if there are too many red flags while you're doing your research, then that's not a good supplier to check to deal with. The other thing you can check online is their import export code to make sure that they are actually an exporter, that they do have an export license. So for this as well, you can get their IEC code by Googling IEC code plus supplier name. But usually the IEC code is not as publicly available as the GST number is. So you might also have to ask the supplier for their code, and that's totally fine. Don't hesitate to ask for their IEC code. It's totally fine for suppliers, for buyers to ask for that, and suppliers do provide it. And once you have the IEC code, then you go to this website, dgft.gov.in. And again, you can just do a search in Google, check IEC code India. It'll just take you to this website. DGFT just stands for Directorate General of Foreign Trade. So once you're here, enter the IEC code, and then what you will see is, so this is the website, and you enter the IEC code over here. You also need to enter the first three characters, or at least the first three characters of the company name. And then this is what you'll see. So the IEC number is here. This is the PAN number. PAN number is basically an income tax number. Date of birth, IEC status valid. So this is important. You want to make sure that it's valid, because if they have not been exporting for a certain number of years, or if they have not been following certain rules, regulations, this may be invalid. So this should be valid. IEC cancel status, it's not a problem. So here, this is what you need to focus on: category of exporters. So here you can see it's clearly mentioned that this is a merchant exporter. That means they are a trading company. They do not have their own manufacturing facility, and they are sourcing products from different factories or different artisans, and they are just maybe packaging them in-house and sending them, exporting them. But they're still exporters. They do have export experience, but they are not a manufacturer. Now let's look at another one that I searched. So this is a different company, and you can't see the oh, here's the company name, Ryan International. And the category of exporters is manufacturer exporter. Now this is very important, because on the IEC code, on this IEC certificate, it's not easy to get manufacturer as your status. You have to provide proof that you actually own a factory for them to give you this status. So only companies that have a manufacturing facility will get this status on their IEC certificate. So this is a very important way to check whether or not a company is export focused. Okay, awesome. So that was my presentation, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about India Sourcing Workshop that's coming up later this month, August 20th and August 27th. This is a 2-day live workshop where we're going to be talking about everything related to sourcing from India. We're going to be teaching how to, what kinds of products you can source from India, how to place orders, how to manage quality control, how to manage lead times, how to manage shipments and logistics when you're sourcing from India, and what sort of cultural sensitivities you need to be aware of, and how India differs from China, because a lot of companies, a lot of sellers are actually sourcing from China, but when they come to India, things don't really work the same way. There are a lot of similarities in terms of the process, but there are some very key differences as well. And I've been in the sourcing industry for 20 years, and I worked in China and I worked in India. So I have a very balanced view of both countries, and I know what are the advantages and disadvantages of sourcing from each country. So that's something that we're also going to be talking about at the workshop. And we're also going to be talking about the different types of we're going to be sharing some templates as well. So purchase order templates, NNN templates, some guidelines on how to do supplier contracts, for example. And so there's a lot that's going to be taught at this workshop. It is basically an A to Z course of how to source private label products from India, specifically for e-commerce sellers, Amazon sellers. And you can use this code for 10% discount. So this is ISW, that stands for India Sourcing Workshop, eCom Q410. So that's eCom Q4 Summit, and then 10 is the discount code that you're getting. So ISW eCom Q410 for 10% off India Sourcing Workshop. The URL is indiasourcing.net/workshop. So definitely check it out. We also have a Facebook group, as I mentioned previously, where if you want any help or you have any questions related to sourcing from India, join the Facebook group, post your questions in there, and we will be very, very happy to help you. So that's it from me today. Thank you so much for joining me over here on this presentation. And I look forward to helping you source products from India. Goodbye.